Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So we finally got another build update for the Boneshatter build, and we are punching well above our weight. So we've hit about 10.4 million DPS on the projected tree for 2 extra levels, but I'm at level 94 right now, and basically, yeah, we are pretty well like in the end game, kitted up. We're just doing basic min and max at this point. So basically, a bit of an overview for the build. Obviously, if you haven't been following, we're stacking up our trauma stacks. We get 8 trauma stacks with this setup. Currently, we can we can sustain more, but it's just attack speed that we need to get up and sort of kicking a bit better. But basically, where we're at is we're at 415 depth delve, and we're just doing that with great ease. So basically, this should be able to get to 800 depth without any massive issues with the current setup. We're fully 6 linked. We've got, I think, 11 endurance charges, and because we're an endurance charge stack, we use Arn's Anguish to get a ton more damage. We also have constant flask uptime, and this is coming from a combination of when we get hit, but when we crit, and because we crit so much, and we have a Watcher's Eye that gives us a gain of flask charge when you critical strike while you have precision, then essentially we just constantly have flask uptime. So another couple of things, we have relocation of the build now. We have our All's Uprising with Charisma. We managed to get haste into the build, which we're leveling up at the moment. And then basically we've switched out our gloves. We've now got +1 non-Vaal strikes, which gives us our additional strike, which means we save points on having to use the nodes down here for Tribal Fury with the attack mastery for additional non-Vaal strike. Also, you'll notice in the POB, and we'll talk about it very soon, we have triple clusters set up. So we're pretty much at that point, and we are still stacking Rage, we're still stacking all the good stuff, and we have Nature's Patience in the build as well. And obviously, we've also got our Divine Flesh set up with our 4th Vaal set up, and we have essentially almost fully capped at 80% chaos resistance as well, so we're at 79%, so we can get a little bit more into the build. Now, the regeneration looks low until your flask goes off for Consecrated Ground, and that's basically constantly going off, in particular when you're getting hit by bosses, and when you're critting, when you're hitting the bosses, that'll keep going off, which is really useful, because that's going to make us more survivable. And maybe the biggest thing in the build now is we have a Forbidden Flesh setup, which makes us almost immortal. So we have Untiring, which on the node basically gives us like increased amount of life recovery based on physical damage mitigated over a certain amount of seconds, which is basically optimum for any Boneshatter builds. This just makes us insanely powerful with the ascendancies that we already have with the Ancestral Commander. It is just a ridiculously tanky build. Now, a couple of the things I just struggle on. It's not good at Maven. Maven is just not what this build is designed for. It's also not very good at tanking Shaper Beams, so we can't take Shaper Beams with this, but we can pretty much fight everything else head on, just base tank. It's totally designed for Delve, but it, as you can see, can do everything in the end game. Have I taken it to Ubers yet? I haven't taken it to Ubers yet. It'll do T17s, no problem. It'll do basically everything in the end game, no problem. In the current iteration of the build, this is all you take to it. And we're about, I think, 40 to 50 div invested at this stage. So, you know, some gear I did craft in it, like rings and stuff like that. The rings definitely need a lot more. And the helm, I ended up crafting by just fossil crafting. Same with gloves, I just bought those and then crafted the implicits on that, and then self 6 linked my 4th Vaal setup. But basically this was like almost max roll setup too, so it's a pretty good roll. And then yeah, I farmed my Uprising out of Delve, and Flasks I just bought because they were pretty cheap. And then Relicash was like 2 divs, something like that when I bought it. Should be cheaper now. And Eventuality Rod was like, I think this was like 12 div, so this was the most expensive item in the build, and it's not even a very good one. And we crafted Culling Strike using rune crafting, which is like 48 chaos, something like that. Overall, the build is pretty affordable, like if you've just been playing like me to get it up and running. Cluster Jewels, basically, we're looking at 1 div for Feed the Fury, Martial Prowess, Feel the Fight, maybe 2 div. We're looking at 1 div for Master the Fundamentals, Battle Hardened, and Furious Assault. And realistically, like, just self-craft an Overlord setup and you'll be laughing either way. Anyway, let's get into the config page, talk about that, where all the damage numbers are coming from and everything else, and then we'll talk about the gear and everything else we've got in the build. Okay, our resolution's a little bit jank, but anyway, let's get into it. So this is the POB that we're currently looking at. We've got about 10.4 million DPS. Effective hit pool is totally misleading on this build. It is significantly more tanky than what it's actually saying here. But anyway, doesn't really matter too much. So yeah, config page. So basically we have Linares and Tukahama when we're standing still. So we have time spent stationary as 5. And that also synergizes with the Nature's Patience that we've got here. And then we've got Power Charges, Frenzy, and Endurance. We generate these from everything in the build, but we have these actively because we've got Ralakesh's Impatience, which is our boot setup. We've got Fortify. This is coming from our Overlord setup, so we get Fortify when we basically hit the 6 seconds with staves. So, yep, that gives us automatic Fortify. We have 40 Rage. This is to account for this additional Rage Battle Trance Mastery up here. So, the base is 30, we get 40. So we are a lot more powerful. We have leeching that's built into basically everything, whether you look at the cluster jewel setups and we have Feed the Fury and Fuel the Fight, so we're leeching. We're on consecrated ground. That's because we have our sulfur flask, which is pretty much always popping. Enemies nearby is 10. We're usually getting hit recently as well. And then on top of that, we just have our banner skill. When we plant, we do get a lot of damage from our banner skill being up because it does throttle up our accuracy because we are slightly deficient on that. So, yeah. Anyway, is what it is. And then we have our Pridar on maximum effect. Some people will be like, oh, no, you can't do that. Look, put it to initial if you don't like it. Otherwise, I got it on maximum. If you're fighting bosses, it's going to be maximum. If you're standing still and just, punching away. 8 trauma stacks is what we can sustain. You can get as high as 10. If you can sustain up to 10, or you can get it to 10 with more attack speed, then more power to you. But yeah, your damage is going to go up pretty significantly. And then we have Intimidate. We just use this Rage node in here. We currently do this because I don't have Awaken jewels in the build, but Rage Mastery, Intimidate while you have Rage. So that's pretty much the go. This is Guardian and Pinnacle Boss damage, and there's no other damage modifiers on this build whatsoever. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing really crazy about it, but we are getting pretty good damage stats and pretty good defense. And our net life recovery is at about 1,000 per second, which is pretty damn strong. Okay, so with gear loadouts, pretty much helm, we fully upgraded the helm in this build. So you still need the implicits, which are crafted on. You just use your Ichors and the other one, Ambers. And then basically I managed to craft a 1500 armor helm, which is pretty wild, with 10% life regeneration rate and 32% chaos res. Now I did this with aberrant fossils, which allow you to chaos craft on the stuff. I find them to be the best for defense. And then I just crafted some lightning resistance onto it. Then on our chest piece, we have a 6-length 4th Vaal. This isn't corrupted, it's just a very high roll. For our main weapon, we use an eventuality rod. Now, the reason why we do this is it increases the number of maximum power charges and endurance charges that we have, and we basically just roll up to an insane level of DPS. So as you can see, I have a pretty high level of DPS on mine. And then we have just attack speed rolled onto it, and culling strike we do in the town in Kalgur. And basically it's 12 life runes or something like that. So I would recommend Culling Strike over putting physical damage on this because it's a lot more useful, especially when fighting bosses. We then run an All's Uprising with a Charisma Anoint. This is the Pride roll. The reason why we run this, increase armor and Pride has no reservation, which is really powerful. We'll talk about that very soon. Rings, just Chaos Res rings that give us Fire and Cold Res, regeneration, and any flat physical damage you can get, and life. And I've got one with Rarity on it too, which is basically meaningless. Our gloves we've switched out from Tanuahi and we moved to just Goliath gauntlets. Now these don't have the highest armor roll, but they give us increased accuracy and +1 to strike nearby enemies. They also give us life regeneration, max life, attack speed, and a fair bit of damage across the board. So these are pretty useful right now, way better than the Tanuatis. Though it would be nice to get Adrenaline Onslaught. We don't really need it because we do tons of damage and this is much more defensive. It gives me a lot more regeneration, which is better in Delph. Then we use a Corrupted Arn's Anguish. This gives us an implicit, which is a Corrupted Implicit for 11% increased attack speed during any flask effect. And we get Brutality Charges, which throttles up our damage as we stack Endurance Charges because it converts our Endurance Charges to Brutality Charges moving forwards. Ralakesh, pretty much don't need to explain that anymore. They're just the best boots. And when you're standing still, you get basically max charges on everything, which is really useful. Best way to throttle damage on this build, and defense as well. And then basically we're running Sulfur Flask, Sapphire Flask, Topaz, Ruby Flask, and Basalt. Basalt's better than Granite. Granite's like flat armor, but 20% scaled with also reduced curse effect is pretty useful. And you also need a flask with avoid shock as well, because this synergizes with the jewel that we'll talk about very soon. That gives you 43% chance to avoid all ailments, which is really useful, and we just need to scale that up later in the build. But that's it for gearing. Pretty straightforward build. Okay, so for gem setups, in the helm, we've got faster attacks, war banner, leap slam, and life tap, so we don't tap mana. In our eventuality rod, we don't have a 6-link setup, we have 2 3-links, and they need to be specifically these colors. So we have vitality, which we don't actually use in the build, so you can just take that out, so it's a spare socket. Or you could put, for example, what was it? Not enhance. You could put empower to level these up a little more. And then you could run determination and haste, which is what I do. And then I also have life tap, mark on hit, support, and assassin's mark. So we do assassin's mark whenever we hit something, which is much better than warlord's mark or anything like that. Then in our chest piece, we run Boneshatter of complex trauma. We have multi-strike, brutality, melee physical damage. We've got endurance charge on melee stun, and we've got impale. Arguably, you don't really need this, but this is a pretty good damage buff. Like it's, well, actually, no, you would. 4 times 13 is a pretty significant damage buff overall. It's probably better than any one individual, gem setup or anything like that. So it's probably still BIS at this point. In our gloves, we got more duration, automation, molten shell, and blood rage. And then in our boots, we've got empower, level 3 empower. We've got precision, we've got pride, and we've got arrogance. Now, we can use arrogance with pride because of the Yawl's Uprising. Because it has no reservation, arrogance actually makes pride significantly stronger. And as a result of that, you do a lot more damage, which is pretty damn useful. Now, if you've been following the build from the start, this tree has drastically changed, and I've made adjustments to the original plan tree as well, so this is probably a lot more optimized. So in this case, we come in, we still have our same setups here, but we basically re-bridged these points down here, which we covered in the last video. But more or less, we've got our Storm Shroud jewel. Now, this is what synergizes with our avoidance for shock. So as we stack shock avoidance, it also means we have elemental ailment avoidance. This has come down a fair bit. I think I paid like 1 div for this. Then we have Dex node here. So we come up, we grab all the stave nodes for smashing strikes and everything, and increased defenses as well. And then also the devotion and life cost node here. We need every single endurance node we can hit, and faith and steel up here. And then we just have like a corrupted blood immunity jewel, which just gives us a ton of everything that we basically use. We use block, we use leech, and we have life recoup as well. You could get crit onto this, which would be a lot better, but I don't have that yet, and to be honest with you, I don't think I really notice a massive issue. Maybe when I get further down and delve. And then in our cluster jewel setup, we have heavy hitter and we have overlord with our nature's patience, and then we just have another like crit multi life, another block jewel, and it just gives us more defense at the end of the day. Then we grab Battle Trance, we also grab Disembowel, and then we come down and grab Stamina. Now, as you level up, you want to pick up every jewel socket that you possibly can in this build. And then basically we come down and we have our Divine Flesh set up. So this is running our Glorious Vanity with Zabiqua. So we have Divine Flesh. We don't take any of the nodes around here because if we do, they're all corrupted and they're pretty bad. So, you know, we don't need them. Some of them are not too bad, actually. Then we come all the way down here. So we take our other Vigor node down here, and we also have another like damage node with Chaos Resistance and whatnot as well to try and get our Chaos Resistance capped up. Then we take Cloth and Chain, and we also want to take the 8% increased armor per endurance charge, because that still stacks even though you stack brutality charges. Then we also have Golem's Blood too, which is just really useful to take because it's such a huge amount of life and regeneration. Then we come down, we grab Hard Knocks. We come down and grab the Cluster Jewel node down here. And we want Feed the Fury, Martial Prowess, and Feel the Fight. And be careful when you buy these too. You want the stave attacks. You don't want like anything else. Or you want flat attacks. Or you want like physical damage. But yeah, if you get like swords or anything like that, you're going to screw yourself out of currency because someone will sell you that. And it'll, you know, not do anything for you. And then we have our Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh setup for untiring. This ended up costing me, I think, just around 10 div overall. Just depends on the market. These were actually not very expensive. So they were like One was 6 and one was 4 divs, something like that. So they're pretty cheap. And then basically we come all the way across, and you also probably want to pick up these 2 dual nodes socket, or this dual socket node too, but you don't really need it at this stage. Then we come all the way down and we want to grab Master the Fundamentals, Battle Hardened, and Furious Assault. In this case, I've just got like any old jewel that I had sitting here, and obviously I would probably get another Chaos Res jewel with minimum 9%. We don't need Lightning Res, and the mana reservation is irrelevant, so we're probably just going to get something that's a little bit better than this, that's going to give us increased damage. And then I've also got Watcher's Eye in here, which gives us 44% reduced extra damage from crits when you have Determination, which is really useful in Delve. And then gain a Flash Charge when you deal a critical strike while affected by precision, and this is just really good because it just keeps you in the fight constantly and keeps your flask popping off. Now ascendancy wise, they haven't changed, so it's still the same go. First to Toughened Skin, then Ancestral Endurance, then Ancestral Defiance, and then Born Under Fire. And this becomes a lot more potent as you cap your chaos resistances as well, because of the Divine Flesh. So there's a bit of like double conversion going on. In particular, this is a lot more powerful because this has nearby enemies convert 50% of their physical damage to fire. It doesn't convert the damage taken to fire, which is actually a lot more powerful with this configuration than if it converted the damage to fire when it actually hits you, which is a bit different. So this is actually probably one of the best nodes in the entire tree when you've got the setup, which is why my build is so incredibly more defensive than I've ever been able to make a Boneshatter build in the past. But yeah, that's basically it for the setup. It's pretty straightforward stuff. This POB will be in the description below if you want a copy of it and you want to try and replicate the build. Anyway, I hope this series is useful if you're following along with it. Some people are like, oh, this build is too squishy, this build is not doing enough damage. I can guarantee this is doing perfectly adequate damage at this point, and it is anything but squishy. Mapping is a breeze, everything is a breeze, delving is a breeze, bossing is a breeze, and it's just overall a fun build. Now, where am I going to take this build? I think I'll play this build for a few more days, and then I might start the Behemoth, but I'll put a poll up on the channel. And yeah, and there are some other Delve videos coming. I've just been a bit busy for the last 2 weeks, so I have like I think 3 or 4 other videos coming. PoE 2 video as well coming, and then yeah, we'll be covering off on stuff before the 0.2.0 release for Path of Exile 2 coming out soon. We don't have a definitive date yet for that, and I also want to see if I can run an infinite delve or endless delve private league as well, but I need to contact GGG for that off the back of the free private leagues that are coming back with these ascendancies in the 3rd month. So, and bear in mind we do have an extra month of Phrecia as well, which is pretty good. So yeah, anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Also, don't forget to like and sub to the channel, and have a good one all, and I'll see you guys when I see you guys.